Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome my friend Samuel, who I just noticed popping up on the screen. Still people coming in. And I'll say one more time for people who've just arrived, I'm requesting people to have their cameras on, and it's wonderful to see all these faces. And the reason I'm requesting that you have your cameras on is this workshop, which I've called a New Year's Renewal. It's all about what we might call relational well-being. So I'll say more about that, but the fact that you can see the other faces and that you're taking in the other faces right now, let's consider that's already part of the workshop. This is part of what's happening. So just kind of look around and see all these faces and notice what it's like. You know, you might know some of the faces, you might not know many of the faces, but what's it like just to gaze at these other humans right now? That's part of what we're doing. So that's why I've invited you to have your cameras on. Now, something that I've been saying a lot recently, and I probably said it somewhere that you might have read it if you showed up here, is I've been using this phrase, there is no such thing as individual well-being without collective well-being. And the funny thing is, I thought that was kind of obvious or not that controversial, but then I got pushback of different kinds, which was fun. So what I don't mean is it's not some like statement of morality, like we're all supposed to take care of each other. I mean, that might be a good idea, but that wasn't the point. And some people said, well, are you saying that the individual's well-being is less important than the collective? Like you're supposed to, people brought up scary Orwellian notions of like you have to, you know, no, it doesn't mean that. It actually meant from a very simple starting point of maybe I'm an individual and I want more well-being for myself. Let's say that's my starting point. What I'm saying is thinking that I can ignore others and only take care of myself is a bad strategy for taking care of myself. Like, even if I'm not yet worried about everyone else's well-being, ignoring everyone else's well-being will be bad for my well-being. That's kind of what I meant. But you can take all kinds of interpretations of that phrase. And if you want to push back on it, maybe maybe we'll hear about that later. But that is how I think of it. There's no such thing as individual well-being without collective well-being. And the way you are feeling right now, however you would describe it, what I would say to you is part of how you're feeling is the fact that you're on the Zoom call, is the fact that you're seeing these other faces. So, in that sense, we're always in a relationship to that which is beyond us, other people, the world at large. And so that's also what I'm talking about here. Um, so I'm just going to say very briefly a couple things about myself before we sort of get into some interactive stuff. Um, my sort of key training is in the Feldenkrais method, which some of you may know. And so the Feldenkrais method involves teaching movement, but really it is so much more than a movement practice. I really think that the genius of Moshe Feldenkrais was not only understanding how bodies move through space efficiently, he was a martial artist, but he also understood how do humans learn? What is the learning process of a person who lives in a body with a nervous system and a psyche and has to deal with society and all of these things? He layered all of that in. And so the approach that I learned by studying the Feldenkrais method, I apply it beyond the realm of movement. And I also, in my programs, lead meditative practices, somatic practices like Feldenkrais, and we do relational practice. And so we'll do a little bit of all of that today. What Feldenkrais would say is that we are always thinking, sensing, feeling, and doing. So we're doing all of those things. All those layers of experience are constantly there. And we can say that they're all relating together at all times. So again, when I talk about relational well-being, I could talk about, my relationship to another person, But also I can talk about in my own experience, there's what I'm feeling in my body. There's what's happening in my thinking mind. There's the emotional currents that are running through me. And then there's my relationships, right? But there's also those things relating to each other. So that's sort of the overall picture of how I'd like to invite you to think about both individual and collective well-being, or we might use the phrase relational well-being for 2025. Okay, so I'm going to take a drink of water now. Which is me doing the very first of 4 postures that we're going to play with today. And those 4 postures are kindness, connection, curiosity, and play. So if possible, if you could take all the words that I've said so far and just cram them into the word posture. When I say a posture, I don't just mean what I'm doing with my body, but I mean how am I organizing myself in my thinking mind, in my emotions, in relation to others. And I'll sort of give you the whole spiel about why kindness, connection, curiosity, and play. But let's just jump into something right now and ask ourselves, what would it mean right now to be kind? And so I was talking a lot and my mouth was getting dry, and I realized I needed a drink of water. That was me being kind to myself. Pretty simple, not earth-shattering, right? But what did I have to do? I had to pause in my experience, notice something that was happening for me, and notice enough to get a sense of what's one simple thing I could do right now that would make my experience a little better. How could I give myself a little more well-being? And then I took a very simple action to do that. We could use the word, if you imagine that you're with another person, and it would be to slow down and notice what's going on with them, right? What's one simple thing perhaps I could do for that person? And in that case, we might use the word appreciation. But what I want to suggest is the fact that you're here was an act of kindness. Of course, you don't know yet if this is going to be the best workshop you've ever attended, but you had an idea that this was something to do with your well-being. And you actually paused other things in your life and set aside this time for yourself. Right? So that's kindness. So what I think that often happens with kindness, like there's a lot of people who talk about the importance of loving ourselves. I agree with those people. I think it's very important. But what I want to highlight about kindness or self-love or even, kindness towards others is that we could say that as we move through life, we have no idea what's going to happen next, right? And so we're always, even if we kind of try to organize things to be pretty predictable and comfortable, there's going to be those moments when we're facing the unknown. And so one way of describing that is just to use the word learning. Right? If I take a math class and I don't know how to do a particular kind of math, well, I'm in the unknown, but I want to know that. I have to actually learn how to do it. And so I'm going to face the frustration of not understanding. I'm going to face all kinds of things. But if I can be kind to myself when I make a mistake, I'm a more resilient learner, right? I can make a mistake and then raise my hand and ask a question because, whatever, but I can be kind to myself. And what we're after here is how can I do that on all of those levels? How can I be kind in my thinking, in my body, in relation to emotions, in relation to other people or other things? So with those 4 layers and the 4 postures, we could have 16 different things that we're going to do today. I don't think we're going to do all 16 of them, but I'm going to sort of gesture at that as we go along, and we'll do many of those things. But let's be kind to our bodies now. And so I'm going to invite you to do a simple thing, which is to take one of your hands and put it on your face. And if it's your left hand, why don't you put it on the left side of your face? If it's the right hand, put it on the right side of your face. And just notice what that feels like. You could take a few breaths like this and then maybe slightly change the position of your hand. Keep it on the same side of your face, but just you're touching different parts of your face. You're noticing, oh, I have cheekbones. I have little areas that are more indented, or other places where I mostly feel flesh, and other places I feel more bone. And maybe take your hand down for a moment. You might notice that side of your face feels a little different than the other side, just by virtue of that touch. Okay, so let's keep playing with that a little bit. So using the same hand, bring your hand to touch your face. And now you can do a kind of the way I said it, touch your face with your hand. It sounds like the hand is sort of active. Now, could you press your face into your hand in different ways and actually notice the different parts of your hand? The different fingers, the palm. And the idea here is being kind, right? So what's the quality that you're connecting your hand and your face? You could put your hand on the side of your neck, and you could play back and forth, right? You could, the hand is touching the side of the neck, or the neck is touching the hand. But what we could say is, and I'm aware that the way I'm going to talk, it sounds like we're dividing ourselves into parts, which hopefully we don't really do as a overall way of being. But if we talk about my relationship to my body as if my body is me, right? Okay. But still, nonetheless, to use language, I'll say sometimes we ignore our body, right? We just do something, and even though we're tired or we're tense, we just keep doing what we're doing. That's a way of ignoring the body, right? If you think of another person, for some reason, you had the idea that you wanted to be unkind to the other person. One of the easiest ways you could do that is just to ignore them, right? Just pay no attention. They walk in the room, you don't even look up, you don't say hello, right? So this is just kind of saying hello to your face, to the side of your neck, okay? And just let go of that again. But notice again, what are you feeling on that side of your face, on that side of your neck? Even as you breathe, does something feel different, like the air moving down one side of the throat differently than the other? And if you accept that what we're doing here is an act of kindness, then what you feel in this moment is kind of the result, right? Like, oh, that's what I start feeling when I receive a little bit of kindness. And in this case, we're giving ourselves that kindness. Okay. So what we just did was a couple of minutes, right? It wasn't much, but just to say it, can you imagine pausing for 2 minutes to touch your face? You know, throughout the day, like this. So, oh, and I'm just noticing, I'm going to say what I said earlier because some people have been coming in. I'm encouraging everyone to turn cameras on today. So if you've just joined and your camera's off, we'd love to see your face. And so far, we've been practicing kindness by just noticing that we took the time to be here for our well-being today. That was an act of kindness. And we've begun exploring touching the face. So maybe you'd like to use the other hand and touch the other side of your face. And another thing that's important is that you're not trying to fix your body. You're not trying to correct something. Right? You know that friend of yours that really wants to help, but then they just start giving you a bunch of advice. And maybe it would be nice if they would just listen. Right? So maybe the side of the face or this hand or something going on. Maybe if you had a ache or a pain in one of your shoulders, one of your arms isn't so comfortable to lift. So another thing to notice here, and please remember this in any situation where someone is asking you to do movement. Like if you had broken one of your arms, I hope you wouldn't be just trying to follow my directions right now, right? Do whatever we do today in such a way that it works for you, right? Okay, so take your hand down and you might notice, oh, something's happening on this side of my face that's new. And now with this second hand, bring it to your face. And as we said before, you can move your face or you can touch the side of your neck, but you can think of your head moving towards the hand, relating to the hand. And now I mentioned it could be something's happening with someone's shoulder or something in your ribs. There could be something about the simple act of bringing the hand to the face that isn't so easy. So what's one way we could make it easier? So as you touch the face, can you use your other hand to hold the elbow that's in the air and support the elbow that's touching your face? And so now you kind of have both arms involved. You can always lower your arms if they get tired, and maybe just touch any part of your face now. You can touch reaching to the other side. And so you're moving your face. You could shift your weight in your chair, maybe turning yourself left or right. Just what feels good. If you turn in a certain direction and that doesn't feel good, well, try a direction that feels better. Right? And then you can switch your hands again, but hold the elbow. Right? So you're supporting the hand that's touching the face. Okay, very nice. So you're welcome to keep doing that if you wish, but maybe again, we could just pause. And very soon, I'm going to invite you to practice kindness with someone else. So I am going to be creating breakout rooms and putting you in them. But before we do that, let's just see if one or two people would be interested in sharing what this initial uh, act of kindness was like for you. I think that might be fun to hear from someone. So if you're feeling brave, just go ahead and unmute. Go ahead, Theo.
What I found very interesting is that when I touched my face, that afterwards the whole face on that side felt so much bigger, like in comparison to the other. There was so much more presence. And so, yeah, that felt very, very well and kind. So thank you for that.
Yeah. This is a fundamental insight from Moshe Feldenkrais that when we bring our attention to part of ourselves, that place just becomes more awake and alive. And if you feel different, like the face feels physically different after touching it, it's true you might have moved something around or, you know, physically changed something through the touch. But what I would also say is you kind of woke up the part of your brain that maps that part of your face, right? So that's another piece of why that can happen. Yeah, someone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I like to just add that the difference, how my left side, I use my left hand a lot more than my right. And it was it was welcoming to invite my right hand to be involved. And it was also to bring an accepting attitude towards it, and kind of and saying that I can learn something from each side,
Right.
and that and then there is the synergy of the two together, which is what happened. I felt my left side started being a little bit more playful when my right side was kind of saying, you know what, I can't really do that, so we're going to do something really different.
Beautiful. So Jane's kind of pointing us at several things that are going to come up later in the workshop, but I'll just highlight that the difference between your left and your right, which just about everyone has, is an ever-present opportunity for learning, right? So those differences and noticing what they are, um, you know, that's really valuable. We'll say more. Um, okay. So let's see if there's one other person who might like to share something. And you know, if there's something that we said in the beginning about individual and collective well-being that got highlighted through what we've done so far, that's welcome also.
If I may, I would, I'd like to say two things, I guess. One, in relation to Theo, I felt not only more awake and expansive, but at the same time, this immense sense of calm and relaxation, which is, I think, is for me is fairly typical. I've just really come to realize that with Feldenkrais is that you come out of a class and you're stimulated at the same time you're just feeling calm.
Mm-hmm.
And then in relation to what you were just saying, it was when we held the hand up with the other, holding the other elbow, the sense I had was that now my hand became somebody else's hand.
Mm.
You know, it felt like the connection was coming from somebody else because I guess because I took the weight, the effort off of my hand. And I could imagine the feeling if somebody else had put their hand on my face or if I put my hand on their face, you know.
So what's interesting there is often people will say it's easier for me to be kind to other people than it is for me to be kind to myself. And if that's you, this can be a nice little trick. I'm just going to relate to myself as if I was my best friend, as if I was my daughter or something like that. If that helps you, then you can do that. Okay. So I'm going to invite you all into a breakout room with a partner in a couple of moments, and we're just going to do something very simple. So I said, if you want to be unkind to a person, ignore them, right? But that'll be a different workshop where we practice unkindness. this is the workshop where we're practicing kindness. So you're going to give this person your attention. And I'm just going to ask you to do a very simple practice called paraphrasing. So you'll be with a partner and you'll both have the opportunity to play both roles. But very simply, you'll be with a partner, and some of you may have done a lot of Zoom calls with breakouts, and some of you may have not. But what will happen is I will be sending messages that you can see when you're in the breakout room. So the first message that will come and will invite the first person to share, and you can just share, why you're here or what it was like touching your face. It's really open-ended. Just share something that feels meaningful to you, related to your well-being, based on what we've done so far. And the person who's listening wants to really give their attention as a gift to the speaker. And one way to really do that is to listen in such a way that you would be capable of saying back to the person what they said to you. Now, we don't want to make this super high stakes. So the person's going to have 2 minutes to share, and they might say various things. But what I'm going to ask you to do as the listener is just listen for what feels significant. What has this person said to me that sounds significant? And then there'll just be 1 minute for the listener to share something I heard you say that seemed significant to me was this, or maybe it's 2 things. You only have a minute, okay? So a message will pop up for the first person to share for 2 minutes. Another message will pop up for the second person to paraphrase back 1 or 2 significant things that they heard. And then we'll switch over. The person who listened first will now share. The person who shared first will now listen and reflect back a couple significant things. It's not supposed to be, that complicated. This is the idea. Can we do something very simple? But often we listen to a person in order to know when they're done, so I can say the clever thing that I've been thinking about, right? That's another way of listening. So we're wanting to not do that, even if you have something clever that you're ready to share. Both people have the turn to do that. So let's hear from a couple of you. I'd love to know, what was it like to be with your partner? So you got to share the experiences a little bit, but do you feel in any way a little different after those few minutes with your partner, sharing something, being listened to, opening yourself to what they had to share? Is that little interaction itself connected to your well-being right now? So I'd love to hear if anyone would like to comment on that. Go ahead, Elisa.
Oh yeah, come on. Yeah, I just feel like my heart's opening, and I just feel so happy to be here and have the experience of that deep interaction that I had in the breakout room. Like it was just yeah, it was just so heartwarming to feel that connection of being heard and witnessing another's beautiful experience. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Robin?
I sort of scan my system now for an answer to your question. What's different now is there's a sense of being more multidimensional than I was before we went to the breakout group. I don't even know exactly what that means, but that's what came to me.
I love that. So far, we've got heartwarming and multidimensional. Mary.
Hi, thank you. I feel like I learned new perspectives about this experience, and like in terms of like a new healing perspective as well that I didn't consider before. So I really appreciate that.
Beautiful. And I'd love to hear from one other person, and I'll just take this moment to highlight something else I'll talk about more. But in my work with clients, I always emphasize something that I call anytime, anywhere awareness, or an approach to how could I cultivate well-being in any situation, right? So it could be that I'd really love to have an hour to myself in a very quiet place and meditate and have my favorite cup of tea and all of that. But it could be that I'm not in that situation, I'm with another person. And it could be that simply listening and maybe using a little bit of this technique of paraphrasing just to ensure that I really am there actually cultivates well-being in the situation I find myself in this moment. So let's see, is there maybe one more? Yeah, Lisa.
I'm very grateful that by the way Linda was listening to me and paraphrasing me, she really helped me to express that I'm longing for more everyday state of life where I have less of this distinction between the private and the public sphere, and where I could allow myself to be touching myself a little more because I love doing that. And I was really in the end thinking, why couldn't I do at least do that sometimes with the children I'm working with? I would never feel judged by them, even if they perhaps find that a bit strange. It wouldn't bother me. So that was an intention that I was setting in that moment in only a few minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's a really, Lisa just touched on something that I realized I wanted to say and hadn't said yet, which is, again, there's kindness and then there's the opposite of kindness, right? There's some kind of unkindness. And one of the ways, let's just say in relation to myself, that I go into unkindness is compulsion. So a word that we're all aware of as one of those dirty words is the word should, right? And so Lisa was talking about, oh, it's so nice to touch my face, and I don't do that. And she didn't say this, but we might say to ourselves something like, well, I shouldn't touch my face when I'm with other people, right? And yet, if touching my face gives me this little gift and I could use that gift right now, the only reason I don't do it is this compulsion that's telling me there's some belief in there that there's a behavior that's ruled out, and then, we come to a workshop and someone says, touch your face, and you do it and you go, wow, right? But you could do these things all the time. And so another aspect of kindness, we're not going to do a practice around it, but some of you may know one of the famous figures in the history of psychology is a man named Carl Rogers. And he has this idea of unconditional positive regard. And this is how he worked with clients, and it's a way we can relate to other people and relate to ourselves. And the essence of it is just to say, however you're feeling right now, however you're doing right now, whether you feel like you're succeeding at, things you're working on or not, what you're experiencing is essentially the very best you could be doing given your entire life history meeting the specific circumstances of this moment, right? Now, you could take another approach and say, well, you should have done this and you should have done that, and because you didn't, that's why X, Y, and Z is happening. But from a position of unconditional positive regard, we just assume that we're doing the best we can. The people we're with are doing the best we can. Doesn't mean we can't be motivated to, quote unquote, do better in some way, but that beginning charity that we give, where we don't assume something wrong, that is a basic kindness, right? And again, to come back to what I said before, it's not just kindness in the sense of being nice. It might actually take, a tone of being more forceful in some situations. But it's a sense of, I want to maximize my capacity to be in a state of learning, right? And if I'm constantly whipping myself for my mistakes, it just drains my energy, it drains my attention, it drains my overall capacity. Okay, so we could say plenty more about kindness, but we're going to move on. But I'll just say kindness is always there. So today, when we talk about kindness, connection, curiosity, and play, you could think of it as like a continuum, that those things are always there. But so here's how I'm defining connection. Connection is turning towards your experience rather than turning away from your experience. So this might sound somewhat similar to the thing where I said, will you pay attention when the person comes in the room rather than ignoring them? But it also has to do with the fact that paying attention is sometimes uncomfortable. Maybe the person who walked into the room is someone that I've had some unpleasant experiences with, right? So there might be a very strong felt desire to turn away. And if I'm kind to myself, I won't, I won't feel bad that I feel that urge to turn away. But if I set the intention of connection, then I intentionally turn towards that person or that recurring experience I'm having that I'm wondering, what does it mean? Maybe I actually look at it a little more. That strange pain in the left side of my neck that I don't know what it is, rather than ignoring it, I put my attention on it. Like I actually turn towards the experiences that I'm having. And when I do that, I can make distinctions. I can notice things, right? I can't notice anything about this person if I turn away from them because they're just not in my view, right? Now, as I pay attention, they're being unpleasant, perhaps, but then if I keep paying attention, oh, they haven't had a good night's sleep for the last 3 nights. It maybe took me a few minutes of paying attention to this person to learn that important piece of information, which now changes my sense of how this person is being with me. I don't necessarily forgive them if they're being, hostile to me, but that context is important, and I wouldn't have that context, right, if I was just turning away. So anyways, like all of the things that we're talking about today, we can practice connection in the body, in the mind, related to emotions, related to anything in relationship. So another practice that I like to introduce to everyone I work with is called the presence mantra. And this is another primary example of what I call anytime, anywhere awareness, because we'll do it together here in this workshop. I'll guide you through it a little bit, but the basic procedure is something that you can do anytime and anywhere. And we'll do it for however long we do it here, but you can do it for 1 minute, you can do it for 10 minutes. It's malleable in that way. And basically what I'm going to invite you to do now is, first of all, just connect to your experience. So whatever that means to you, can you turn towards the experience you're having? Really feel that you're doing that. And now the way the presence mantra works is it just says, whenever you turn towards your experience, there are 5 different relationships that are always going to be there. And in truth, I could have had more than 5, but 5 is enough. So the following 5 relationships are always part of your experience: your breath, you're in a relationship to the ground. If you're sitting in a chair, your chair counts. Right? You are right now in space. Maybe you're in a room. You're in a relationship to the room. You're in a relationship to sound. And it's my voice at the moment, but when I stop talking, there's sound around you. and you're in a relationship with light. So a couple people closed their eyes. You're still in a relationship to light if your eyes are closed. But if your eyes are open, you see what light reflects. You see shapes, colors, lines. Okay, so the very basic practice of the presence mantra is only what we just did, just connecting to those 5 relationships that are always there. That's what's nice, is that they're always there. But if you keep paying attention, your relationship to your breath is an infinite universe. Your relationship to the ground, space, sound, and light. There are all kinds of distinctions. In the past half year, I taught a series of 6 workshops. One was a sort of introduction of the presence mantra, and then there was a whole workshop on breath. There was a whole workshop on ground, space, sound, light. Actually, light is the last workshop that's coming up. I think it's the 12th of this month. It's a week from today, so you can stay tuned for that. But the point being, if I notice those relationships, I can start to make distinctions, and these distinctions might be important for my well-being. So if you come back to your breath for a moment, and just notice the quality of the breath. And the thing that is so amazing about your breath is it reflects the overall state of your nervous system in every single moment. So you're talking to a friend and they say something surprising. Your breath may shift in the very next moment. Now, being intentional with your breath, being kind, the first thing is just, am I breathing? Because sometimes we stop breathing, especially in situations where something's uncomfortable or unfamiliar. So I can just ensure that my breath is actually moving. Now, if for a moment you imagine or you just briefly play with the idea of restricting your breath, you could sense that probably feels like a little less well-being. So I don't want anyone to restrict their breath for a long time. But the point being, throughout the day, my breath has a certain quality. Sometimes it is more restricted. But when I notice that, I can encourage my breath to move again. Now, every one of these elements exists on the inside and on the outside. So your breath goes in and out of your body. When we come to ground, you can think of the solid surfaces below you, but you can also think of your solidity, your bones. And a particular relationship that really says something, usually about your well-being, is the length of your spine. And some people are starting to now shift and like get taller and straighter. So that's great, but I just want to encourage you, please don't do that because you think someone's looking at you and you want to, right? But if you actually collapse your spine a little, which is something you also might do in relation to hearing some bad news or something like that, you might notice if you go back to your breath, it's harder to breathe. Or if you kind of invite, and you don't have to have perfect posture, but you invite the idea that my head is floating upwards, my sit bones are reaching down into the chair, just an image of length might bring more breath. If you were doing what we did before and you were bringing your hand to touch your face, but you noticed, as some people will do, that when I bring my hand to my face, I maybe bring my face to my hand and I actually sink. Your arm is going to be heavier, but if you get taller as you bring your hand to your face, your arm's going to be lighter. Okay? So this is the kind of thing that we can notice. And we can notice in relation to space. Do I feel comfortable in this space? Can I take up space? Could I imagine expanding myself outwards? Or I can even get more fine-grained and say, Do I feel free to move to the left? Because sometimes we feel more free to move to the left and less free to move to the right. For me, I feel more free to move to the right because there's a wall very close on my left. So there's not really anywhere to go. And if I pay attention, I can actually feel that. But sometimes if a certain person is sitting on one side of me, that changes the feeling of the space. It might make that a wonderful feeling. Maybe it's my favorite person. But space has a feeling to it. Can I expand, or do I actually feel that I'm pulling myself in away from the space? So this is very general. I'm talking as if we were like a one-cell organism, and different things will be happening in different parts of your body. But basically, you can think of your muscles. Are your muscles able to be long, or do you feel that you're contracted? And sometimes a contraction in the body, if you just notice it, you can ask, do I need to contract there? It doesn't always magically clear it up. But when I notice it, sometimes there is something I can let go of, and I can be a little more expansive in the space. And think about when you're with another person and they're speaking to you, like what you just did with your partner. Did you feel that you were open, that their words could come into you? Or did those words feel like something you didn't want to come into you, that you were contracting against, right? Now, that's something we can do. Someone's voice is a sound. Our ears open, but then if you're on the street and an ambulance goes by or you hear a loud sound, your ears will contract to protect you, right? So it's not that being closed is a bad thing. There's a reason why. But sometimes, like if you pay attention, some of you won't notice this, but some of you, if you pay attention to your left ear and then your right ear, as if your ear was a mouth, some of you may notice that one ear feels more open than the other. And so you can think of sound as noise. I don't want it. I'm protecting against it. Or sound could be music. There's some famous examples I like to share of experimental musicians who created situations where people were basically hearing the sound of the world, but they dressed it up as a musical performance in order to say, hey, maybe music is everywhere all the time. If music is happening, I can dance to it, right? I can flow with it. I can relate the rhythm of my breathing maybe to the bird song. Okay, and light. Are my eyes tense? Or can they be relaxed and soft and wide? Okay. So this is the presence mantra. We connect to our experience. We can reliably find these 5 relationships. And especially with practice, we can reliably notice that my relationship to my breath is pointing towards or away from well-being. My relationship to sound is pointing towards or away, right? It's also circumstantial. If I'm in a certain situation, the sound is really loud, maybe it really is noise, and I just should go somewhere else if I can to get away from it, right? But in another situation, there might be a sound that's a little irritating, and where we'll get to later, play. If I can be playful, I had an evening once where there was construction crew outside my window at 2 a.m. with a jackhammer. So I wasn't going to sleep. So I just went to the kitchen and started cooking. And then I started dancing to the beat of the jackhammer because I had no choice about the jackhammer. It totally transformed that situation. Okay, now I'm a little behind my schedule, but let's try something. Just bring your hands together to connect. Notice your 2 hands connecting. They were connected to your face before, and then bring them down. And then bring them up again. And just keep touching your hands together, and then after a while, put them down on your own rhythm. So maybe noticing, when do I want to touch them? When do I want to put them down? And can you have an easy breath the whole time? When you're bringing your hands up, when you're bringing them down, you don't interrupt your breathing. Very simply. It's not a big effort to raise your hands, but it's more effort than leaving your hands resting, right? So do you bring your hands up as you breathe in? Do you bring your hands up as you breathe out? And you could try that experiment. You could imagine that your spine gets longer when you bring your hands up, or you could actually imagine that your spine gets shorter when you bring your hands up, and see, do you actually notice the difference? And what we're going to do next is curiosity. So could you be more curious about this? So maybe you touch your hands together and bring them down, or touch them and leave them, whatever you do. But what if for a little while you were very curious about the fingertip of your, let's say your index finger on your left hand? And you put the hands down, bring them up, whatever you do, but it's as if you highlighted that fingertip. Does it change the overall experience? Or if you do the movements and you highlight the pinky finger on your right hand. Do you notice the space between your elbows? What if you were to shift your weight to one side when you brought your hands together? Would it be more comfortable to shift your weight to the right and touch your hands together? Or would it be more comfortable to shift your weight to the left and touch your hands together? The only reason you're doing this is just to feel something, right? But because you're connecting to this experience, which is admittedly a little bit arbitrary, I'm just touching my hands and shifting my weight, but I'm creating a kind of a more interesting context than just sort of, I love meditation, but I'm not just quietly sitting here, right? I'm creating a little situation, and I'm feeling something, and I'm feeling these little distinctions. Could you touch your hands together? Keep them touched together, and now start touching your face, but you're going to have to use the back of your hands because your palms are glued together. Which part of your face can you touch? Which part of your neck, your throat? How do you have to move to do that? Is it okay to shift your weight? Will you feel more with your eyes open or your eyes closed? Okay, so just invite another opportunity for people to share. You're always welcome to share about the experience we've just been doing, but also a more general share if you like. I'll just remind you that we're explicitly playing with different aspects of well-being that I've called body, mind, emotion, and relationship. And so, what are you noticing? You have something, Sylvia? Yeah.
Thank you. So I can't imagine paying attention to all this and being with somebody else. I mean, it's taking so much to be aware of what's happening over here that so if I imagine having somebody in front, most of my attention goes over there. Almost all. I mean, I don't even know if I am breathing. Yeah, if I notice my heart beating in a different way, then maybe I pay attention. And then the other thing that I noticed is it's much easier for me to sense with my eyes closed. And integrating what's around and keep, I guess it's, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's an attachment to what I'm thinking. Maybe it's that I don't want to lose the idea, or what is it that takes me, I don't know. Thank you. That's it.
So that was really rich share. I appreciate that. So to the first thing you said, for me to pay attention to all of these things and another person, that's a lot. Yes, it is. But if you're talking to me and I'm like this, does that affect your sense of well-being? Right? So, I mean, that was a little exaggerated, right? But what's going on in my body as I'm with you can't help but impact you. And, you know, we live in a world where, I mean, even it'd be beautiful. There's a couple of you who are close by and many of you around the world. So Zoom is a wonderful thing here, but we're on Zoom a hell of a lot more than we used to be, aren't we? How often do we do these things in person, right? I was just talking to someone in my program yesterday, and she was talking about maybe we need to do a retreat and be together. And I agree, you know, it's nice. But the thing is, when we are together, every little thing makes a difference. The expression on my face as you're speaking to me, you know, the tone of voice, all of these things. Now, what you said, Sylvia, about what I notice about myself, I prefer to have my eyes closed and all these things. Well, that's just really good information. And I think I might have heard maybe a slight hint of, you know, would it be better if this wasn't the way I am? That's an open question we can ask ourselves, but it's also very important to know exactly what works for me right now. Right? So if I'm doing some sort of somatic process, for me, it's helpful to have my eyes closed. Great. And then it just means if I want to be this aware with my eyes open, well, that's another level, right? So in the Grounded Connection program, which I'll talk about, we spend 16 weeks kindness towards ourselves, towards others, towards overall experience of being in the world through to connecting, to curiosity and play. But it is a practice. What I can say very simply is, for me, when I just say breath, ground, space, sound, light, to me, it all appears. It's just all there for me. But I've been doing this for several years now, and that was built on other things I'd learned, right? But you can come to a place where it's no effort to notice if you're breathing or not, or if the left side of your chest feels like it expands more than the right side. Those things will become natural through practice. So that's the kind of thing that we can get to. Okay, I wanted to respond to some really good points there, but let's see if maybe one or two others would like to share. Susanna.
When you first were speaking, and I've heard you speak before about turning toward rather than away, it just felt like there's this different emotional matrix appeared. And I mean, very short experience, you know, but several elements of, I mean, there is an element of kindness to it. There's an element of gentleness to the turning, and there's an element of digestion. It's like of digesting an experience fully rather than cutting off that process. So that, you know, it's very kind of incipient, but I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. So something else that, back to Sylvia, but just to put this out there. So, and this is how we do it in the Grounded Connection program. We're not just debriefing, chatting right now. We're still in the practice. Right? What's it like to unmute your microphone and speak to the group? What happens in your body when Susanna, you know, shares what she shared? Sometimes it resonates, as we say. Sometimes it doesn't resonate. But this is all like, it's like we're in the pond together, right? Someone does something and it ripples. So just inviting you to notice that as we do this, as we share. Maybe one more person.
I just, I think I seem to have a lot of teachers in my family, and I've become aware that as teachers, they get training in it, I guess, or over the years, they very quickly look, or well, I don't know how quickly, but they become very aware of each student and the response, the verbal response, the emotional response, the movement, and the body response, the physical response of each student in a class of 26 or 30 kids. And they seem to be very adept at picking up cues and responding to cues in that sense, which I don't know if that's the kind of practice you're referring to, but for those of us who have not been teachers or been isolated as writers or isolated at the computers, these things don't come as easy. And I think do need a lot of practice. I mean, it would be beneficial to us and to our communications to have that practice. So is this this give and response mode that teachers do, is that kind of what you're thinking about as well in this?
Yeah. So one of the ways I describe a state of, let's say, having a lot of well-being, I use a phrase, the musicality of being.
Yeah.
And you said give and response, but in music we might call and response.
Call and response, that's the word. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, just like if you were, and I'm sure there's people here who do this, you're making music with someone. Maybe over the holidays, some of you were singing together or something like this, right? There's my voice, but there's also the other voices. So I make sound and I listen. Sometimes I'm musical by being silent so that someone else can be heard, right? And yeah, the overall perspective of relational well-being is, sure, I know how I am feeling. And if I walk into the room and I'm happy and everyone else in the room looks really depressed, it doesn't have to make me unhappy, but there's an interaction there. If I'm in a room with 10 people, I can ask the question, how are we doing? Right? And then if there's one person in that room who's doing really wonderful, and they're also really good at listening, they could transform the well-being of the whole room potentially. And part of this practice to me is also, while I never tell someone that they should go around and transform everyone they meet, like you could, right? By showing up in a certain way, you could be impacting everyone around you in a particular way. And again, if we come all the way back to the individual experience, there's still some individual benefit in benefiting the well-being of others. Because when I'm in a room of 10 people, there's always the question of our well-being, however I would describe my individual well-being. So we can connect those things. So I'm loving the shares. They're very rich. And I'm also wanting to give you a brief break because we're about halfway through the time that we're going to spend together. But here's what I'm going to say to you. So we've played a little bit with kindness, with connection, and what remains that we're going to get to is curiosity and play. And I'm going to give you a certain, my little definition of those words, but of course we all know those words. So you can predict a little ahead of time, curiosity, play. But let's come back at 25 minutes past the hour. So you have about 7 minutes if you need the bathroom or a drink of water. And I just encourage you, do whatever you like for your break, but can you actually hold some of this framework in mind? How could you be kind to yourself during the break? Or what could you connect to that maybe you don't feel connected to? Or what are you curious about it? All right, I'm going to begin. Again, if you're somewhere nearby, please turn your camera back on so we can see you. And maybe as we move into this question of curiosity, we could, again, as we did earlier, just take a moment and look at the screen. If you're especially curious about someone on Zoom, you can go to the upper right corner of their square and there's 3 dots and you can pin a person and make them really big and they won't know. But there's a really cool word that I learned last year, and we're doing it right now. It's called ingression. The idea of ingression is like the same way you breathe in the air or you eat the food, you swallow it and digest it. You're doing that with all of your senses all the time. So you could say you're drinking in with your eyes the person that you're looking at. And if you go stand in front of a tree and ingress the tree, there'll be a certain feeling that you get from doing that. You go stand in front of a parked car and ingress the parked car, it will be a very different feeling. So it could be a little subtle, but once you notice it and you try it in different situations, this phenomenon of ingression, it's really just things coming in. And they're always doing that anyway. But if you're curious, the way I would define it, you're open. You're willing to be impacted by what's coming in from the world, from the other person, or even from yourself as you put your attention on yourself and your experience. And it's non-judgmental, right? Judgment is a way to close. Of course, sometimes we use the word judgment to say, have good judgment, or we use it as a synonym for the word discernment, like what we were doing before, noticing if my spine feels like it's getting longer or shorter. But there's a kind of judgment where one of my favorite ways of talking about it comes from one of my teachers who would say, if you're with Sally and John, as soon as you begin to judge Sally, in that very moment, John doesn't shine as brightly. Right? So if you have a judgment, it might be about a specific thing, but it's a closing, right? It's a narrowing, and it will affect your entire experience, not just that one isolated thing. So, but when we're curious, we're also interested in something new, right? It's an expansive, it's an opening. So let's do a little more of what we've been doing, exploring with our hands in different ways. And as we do it, as we go along, I'm gonna start inviting people to unmute and share things that they're getting curious about or noticing as we go, so that our dialoguing can become part of the experience. But I'll just sort of get us started. So we've been touching the face, right? Touching the hands together. Maybe you can do a couple things you already did, just sort of notice, okay, I've done those things many times now. Is it just, oh gosh, we're doing it again? Really? Or is there a curiosity you can bring where you think there might be something here that I haven't noticed yet? Okay. But now I will give you something slightly new. So touch your hands together. You can maybe hold them in front of your chest. And now would you interlace your fingers? Feel how that feels. Probably a fairly familiar feeling. We interlace our fingers at times. But now if you look, one of your thumbs is on top. One of your thumbs is closer to your face than the other one. So can you open your hands and interlace the fingers again, but change all the fingers over so now the other thumb is close? And if if you know the Feldenkrais method, you know this particular game. But some of you may have never done this before. What does it feel like when you put the other thumb on top? Does it feel weird or awkward? Or you might even say, it doesn't feel like me. So our little game is just to begin to change the interlacings and feel the hands and their connection. Maybe we can be kind to ourselves and we can make sure our breath is still flowing, make sure that we still can find length in the spine, sense of expansion. But you might find, well, okay, but it's harder when I interlace my fingers this way to have that beautiful breath. Maybe. Or maybe it's just strange, different, but not bad. It's just less familiar. Okay. Now, I'll sort of hold my hands up so you can see something, and I'll also exaggerate. As I change the interlacing of my fingers, can you see that I'm also moving my wrists? Can you see that I'm also shifting my forearms? Now, as was pointed out before, sometimes if I go too quickly, I can't digest everything. So whatever you feel is fine. But if you spent more time, you could think, well, there's this whole structure from my shoulder blades on my back to my elbows to my hands to my fingers. And in fact, all of that is changing. If you had someone resting their hands on your shoulder blades while you were doing this, you might feel that something was shifting back there. If you really slow down and maybe close your eyes, you have your fingers one way, and just rest in whichever of the positions you're in. But now notice your eyes, the feeling in your eyes. And then switch your hands and see if something feels different in your eyes, or if your eyes perhaps move. And if you don't feel it, that's fine. But some of you might feel a connection to the eyes. Okay, so here we are, we're playing with interlacing our fingers. I've given you a bunch of suggestions, but if anyone is noticing anything or has a question, or I wonder about this, I wonder about that, it could be fun to put something out in the group. And as soon as you do that, you're going to, other people are going to get ideas, or they're going to notice something new because of what you shared. So is anyone getting curious about something particular as you play with your hands here?
It's Theo. Well, I had this before that when we did it with our fingers, that I really.
A szövegek nem arról szólnak, hogy mi ezt az elménket cincáljuk, és...
Let's see if, okay, they muted. Go ahead, Theo.
When we did before, when we are touching our fingers before the break, I already had that I wanted to look at what is happening with my hands. And I was really, not only, it was not controlling, but just curious about what's happening there. And my eyes wanted to observe that and see what's happening. That was really, I had the same now.
Mm-hmm. So Theo's talking about the eyes and wanting, but there's also, yeah, a desire to see. Something else that someone's noticing or getting curious about here?
Excuse me, Seth, in relation to the eyes, I found that depending on if I crossed with whichever way the top thumb was pointing, that's the way my head wanted to go, which was also the way my eyes wanted to go. And so if my right thumb is up and pointing left, my head wants to go left. And if I reverse it, I can do it, but it may be my shoulders. It doesn't want to do it as well. And so if my left thumb is on top, my head wants to go right because my thumb is pointing right. And then I can start to feel it all in my upper torso. And it feels strange to do it to move my head differently. And yet I can play with it.
Yes.
So
that's where we're going, right? And this is very much like you notice you have a habit. Every time I do this, I also do that. So curiosity could be, can I do it the other way? And I know Linda, she's been doing Feldenkrais for years, so that's what we often do. We'll say, can I turn my head to the right as I do it? Can I also turn my head to the left as I do it? Oh, I like the way it feels when I do it that way. The other one feels weird.
yeah.
What would it be like if I could breathe just as easily, if my spine could be just as long in either case? And, again, you might ask yourself, well, why do I need to change the interlacing of my fingers and turn my head in both directions? You could say you don't have to, but you're presenting, again, new possibilities to your brain, not just random movement, right? And if you're willing to give yourself the time to do something that on the one hand feels a little arbitrary, but on the other hand is changing up the patterns, this might be an act of kindness. There might be something here. So let me just invite you. We're kind of going to, we can just, well, okay. So now remember what we did before. You can touch your face. But now maybe you can touch with your forearms. You can touch anywhere inside this structure. And then every once in a while, you can change the interlacing of your fingers. And you might notice just that change. It changes my overall experience. You can touch your chest. You can touch your belly. You could touch your legs. Where can you touch with these interlaced fingers? And when you change the interlacing, how is that experience different? Can you do all this without straining, without being unkind to yourself? That includes just stopping and taking a break if you kind of feel like you've done enough, right? Okay. But as we keep playing, I wonder if I could have one very curious volunteer. And I'm just going to ask you to share a little more, and that's all you have to do. But we're going to play. Okay, beautiful, Margarita. So could you just, for a minute or so, tell us a little bit about your experience, whether with what we were just doing or overall, doesn't matter. Just give us a little taste of what's happening for you.
Well, I had this curiosity that I was carrying through into this last piece we just did around. You had said, we clasp hands the way that's more familiar, and then clasp hands that's less familiar. And in the clasp that's less familiar, it can feel like we're holding hands with someone else, not even ourselves. And so I got really curious about that because I was like, well, then this is a way I know myself less. And what is there to know here? How can I get to know this aspect of self that isn't as familiar more?
Mm.
And so I was kind of riffing out on that.
Pause you for just a second.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear a little more. But is anyone here getting a little curious about Margarita? Okay, so I'm going to ask her to share a little more, and then I'm going to ask some of the other people here to ask Margarita open-ended questions, something they're getting curious about. So as she speaks, yes, you two were playing with your hands and stuff, but she's also describing, let's say you hadn't done the exercise and you're just hearing her describe she did the exercise and she started thinking this and started doing that. What is being revealed about Margarita? What are you curious about? How could you open yourself to her more, and how could you invite her to share more with you by displaying your curiosity? We could call this another level of kindness. Okay, so that's the frame, but say a little more, Margarita, please.
Well, yeah, I just, again, just became super fascinated with this idea of aspects of ourselves that are here that we don't know as well. And how, with curiosity and kindness and playfulness, how do we lean into those parts of ourselves that we don't know as well?
Who has a curious question they'd like to ask Margarita to learn more about her?
Margarita, why exactly the hand was something that was interesting to you? It was for same for me. I was the most curious about this experience of weirdness and especially when Seth said uh, people say that's a thing that doesn't feel like me. So I'm curious what else you find that brought you into that experience like it did for me.
Yeah, well, I think if I'm understanding the question, I feel like that idea of holding hands with oneself, right? We hold hands with someone else, and it's such a like a sweet gesture, right? An intimacy, and I was like, ooh, I want to have this sweet, intimate moment with myself, and especially with the framing that Seth gave around, oh, maybe it doesn't even feel like it's holding hands with yourself. And I was like, huh, he's right. It feels less like I'm holding hands with myself because it's less familiar. So I was like, who is this person I'm holding hands with? Who's this part of myself that is less familiar? What else does she have to reveal? And I think there's just so many nerve endings in our fingertips and hands that it really alivens all of that.
So I'm going to invite another question for Margarita, but also I'll just say, and so there's a couple hands, that's great. So maybe we'll see. We've got a little time for this. But also, what are you getting curious about as you listen to Margarita that's not just what she's saying? Like, what kind of a person is she? What is maybe coming through? How could you learn more about that? So I think Theo has a question for you.
Thank you so much showing yourself and talking about your hands and how you do that. I found that I was not interested in what you're doing with your hands. I was very curious about you as a person. So what do you work? What did you eat today? What desires do you have? So I'm really curious about you as a whole person, and the whole thing with your hands that was so much in the background. I was only looking at you, and I love the way you smile and would like to have a coffee with you and just meet you in person. That's what I thought and feel.
Well, that's sweet to receive. Thank you. I have a cashew hummus in front of me right now with a little bit of spice that I'm eating with some rosemary crackers. Yeah, I'm a healer, in my profession, and yeah, I would love to get coffee with you too sometime.
Thank you.
Curiosity, and then everyone's practicing kindness and connection also. Let's take maybe Jane.
Okay. Thank you so much for being so forthcoming, Margarita. The questions that started coming up for me was the relationship between the two hands. And is it, what was that relationship like? Was one taking on a certain role and the other taking the other role? Or was it a pairing back and forth like a tennis game? I was just kind of curious, and what I got from you is that you're very creative and a risk taker. Yeah, that you are interested in the world and you being connected not just to yourself but to others too. Sure, I'll pay for a maca to you.
Well, thank you. That's also sweet to receive. I think, yeah, I'd say I'm definitely very curious about the world, and I do some risk taking, um and yeah, I think I'm creative as well. I'd say, yeah, it was a little bit more like a like a tennis back and forth, but you made me curious, like, ooh, I want to give each hand. You kind of sparked more curiosity for me as far as um, kind of like we did with our face. If I just say one hand is more feeling and the other hand's more receiving, and I change the roles on that, like that could probably um, kind of support my inquiry about this less familiar self. So I'm going to play with that more.
The phrase that Seth said earlier about, if you judge one thing, you are, there's a little bit of a judging fog on other things.
Right, right, yeah, absolutely. Good reply here.
So I'm going to jump in with one last question, which is, Margarita, what is your experience when other people get curious about you, like just happen? What was that like?
Well, I kind of jumped in without knowing exactly what we were doing, which is kind of fun. But as you invited people to be like curious and take me in, I could feel myself get warm. I was like, ooh, I'm getting a little warm over here. And then as there was a little more back and forth with the curiosity, uh, I the warmth kind of dissipated a bit, and I started to feel a little more integrated in the group. And I noticed myself too, kind of the way Theo was like, oh, I'd love to get coffee with you. I was like, oh yeah, you're asking me questions, but I have questions about you and you. So yeah, it was a awakening the curiosity also. So.
Beautiful. So I think what Margarita just said is a really beautiful example of this idea of relational well-being, right? The kindness, the connection, the curiosity coming from others drew her to want to reciprocate, or this idea of the call and response that came up before, right? And she literally felt warmer, right? And when we do it this way, and one person gets all the attention, other people might think, well, I want to do that too. So I'm gonna try to create another moment before we finish where you can also be together in a breakout room. But let's go to the final frontier. Let's play. Okay. So I'm not going to tell you a whole lot of what to do because that would seem rather strange. Here's how to play. Step one is this, step two is that. But let's start with what we've been doing. And I'll teach you one more little game that you can play. This came up when I was working with a British tango dancer who was in Brazil, and she was doing this kind of thing, and she was having back trouble and different things. So when you switch your hands like this, you notice that you're spinning the palms against each other, right? So if you stop interlacing your fingers, you can just spin the palms until the fingers point completely away from each other. And then you can spin the palms in the other direction, right? And once you get to this position, if you want, you could begin exploring all the way up to your neck. And you could go down, and then you could come back here, and then you could spin your palms again, and you could come all the way up to your neck. And if you're playing, you wouldn't really need any reason to do this. You would just do it if it was fun. And if it wasn't fun, you would find something that was more fun to do. But when you're playing, right? And so what if you didn't have to be sitting down? What if you didn't have to, I don't know, not make noises with your mouth? So if you want to, you could stand up, you could move around, you could explore, you could touch, you could interlace your fingers, you could spin your palms. Generally speaking, when we play and we do something just to do it, to see what it's like, we don't usually feel like jumping off cliffs, even though we don't know what that's like. You probably do something that feels safe and good. You might play. There's been some discussion about my hand feels like someone else's hand. Is there someone in your life that you'd like to be a little more playful with? Could you sort of create an imaginary scenario with what you're doing where that other person is involved? Do you ever notice that you just maybe don't feel so connected to what we're doing and you think, I want to stop. I want to take a break. I want to think about what this is like for me. What's the experience you want to have? What feels playful to you? So I'm going to invite you to keep exploring for a few more minutes, and then you're going to have some playmates. We're going to give the opportunity to be with some others here. There's another teacher that I've worked with who talks about well-being in terms of three things. She says it's all a matter of posture, pacing, and play. And her basic definition of posture is what feels good in your body. Can you put yourself in a place where you feel good? Great. Pacing. What's the pace that works for you? Do you need more time? Do you want to speed up? What's your rhythm, right? And what she also says is if you get posture and play, or if, sorry, I messed it up. If you get posture and pacing, play just happens, right? Play is what happens when I'm not making myself do something. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm doing it the way I want to. And then potentially I can invite others into this place. I might actually take a risk. I might scrape my knee. I might do something that ends up with hurt feelings by someone that, maybe I have to notice how I play and maybe there's some little moment. But for the most part, we play to keep playing the game, right? We play in a way that the well-being of everyone we play with is also respected. Maybe I could be more playful in the way I think about what I'm doing right now. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create breakout rooms. Yeah, most of you will have 3 in your room. Some of you may have 4. And you're going to be there for a few minutes, and I'm going to just send 2 messages to you. So the first one is to share something that you're imagining about your 2025. Okay. And just make it a statement, because I'm not going to send amounts of time, but you just say something you're imagining about your 2025. You're done. The next person says it. And maybe it goes around more than once. So just pick one thing, right? And then we'll have a few minutes with that. And everyone hopefully gets to share. And you might just notice that hearing what other people imagine has an impact on you, right? So you can be aware of the relational well-being that's happening. But you get to imagine here. You don't have to predict. You don't have to be right. Keep a little of this sense of playing together. And then at the end, you're going to get an opportunity to just express to the other people what it's like. I'll put this in the message too, but there's a little phrase that we often use in the practices we do in the Grounded Connection program. You just say, being with you this whole time, I feel and then you finish that sentence. So I'll put that, and everyone will have a chance to do that. So I know I said that quickly. I hope it's clear. If it's not clear, just play and do it the way you think you're supposed to, or do it the way you think you're not supposed to, whatever you like. So off to your breakout rooms. All right, I think everyone's back. I saw some playful expressions, so hopefully you had fun in the sandbox with friends. We're more or less at the end of what I wanted to share with you in terms of workshop activities, but I am going to tell you about the Grounded Connection program that takes all of what we've done here and really dives deep. But before doing that, just thought it'd be fun based on that last round of play with your friends, or any overall shares about what we've done today, exploring these 4 postures, as I've been calling them, of kindness, connection, curiosity, and play, if I can remember what they are. So that would be fun. And so we can take a few more minutes for that, and then I will tell you about the Grounded Connection program.
I'm not sure how to raise your hand.
Go ahead.
Okay, one of the major things I've taken from this short program today, Seth, thank you for doing it, is how much more insight you can have if you'll just slow down. I'm newly married 3 years ago, and working through some things like every couple has to work through. And I have been an advocate of this, and now I see it again coming true, is to slow down the conversation, to listen better to what's actually being said, have a chance to feel that, not only what's going on inside of me, but my partner, and then through that, gain appreciation for what's being said, and in being more patient with it, create far more insights about what's actually going on. And all that comes from slowing down. Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, we did different activities, but they were like moving, and then let's slow movement down. Talking to someone, well, let's slow talking to someone down. Meditate, you can just slow down and notice your breathing, right? So yeah, slowing down is fundamental.
Thank you.
Reflection, thanks. And the trick is to slow down things that we don't normally slow down, right? That's part of the trick. Someone else like to share about today, including a question?
Thank you. It's been helpful. It's been really helpful. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
I want to say something, and yeah, I want to say that like we have explored things in the past together, a common understanding of things, and just this gave me some new stuff to play around. I just remember once you showed me something to play around, it was something already like something new, and this is again richer. Yeah, I just want to say I enjoyed that, and then some new aspects too that seem to be actually so close and so seemingly familiar, but then like actually not, and very new territory.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Samuel. Moshe Feldenkrais wrote a few books, and one of his books is called The Elusive Obvious. Right? It's like it's right in front of you, but you never looked at it. And there's always so much like nutrition in that. Just as a fun other example, right? As I'm talking, but if someone else shares in a moment, each person as they talk, this is what I was referring to earlier as musicality, right? They talk, they pause, then they speak again. There's a silence, there's a sound. there's a rhythm, right? The voice goes up and down, right? Can you allow that rhythm to infect you as you listen just a little bit? Whether or not you start, moving around, but right, it's like if suddenly they raise their voice, do you kind of notice an awakening around that? Maybe sometimes they raise their voice a little too much and there's a contraction, and right? But it's right there all the time. Okay, I'm going to see if there's one more share. Otherwise, I'm just going to start wrapping.
It's a little frustrating, Seth, because we meet so many interesting people, like today, and I know they're spread around the world. But you want to, you start a little conversation. I feel frustrated. Thank you very much for this, but I feel a little frustrated because the people I've talked with, I want to have a longer conversation. And then I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking, I don't know if there's anything that exists here in the DC area or elsewhere where people who are interested in these kinds of things or Feldenkrais in general just get together for conversation and play. I know you have the walk in the parks kind of thing, but that's a structured kind of thing. I'm thinking of just, hey, can't we get a venue or can't we just get together and play with each other? Play in conversation and play in movement if we wanted to.
Well, I think you can.
Just like a monthly meeting or every other month or something.
Yeah. Well, the Grounded Connection program meets every Friday. And when I hear positive feedback about the program, a lot of it tends to be about what people learn from each other. Because people who have been in the program, there's a few of them here, and they're welcome to share if they'd like. But what we've been doing is what you just said. We get connected with someone else, and we get curious. And the point is, and what we learn in the program is how to do this with any person I meet at any point in time, right? Before you leave this workshop, there is something called private message on Zoom. So if you really met a great person today, you can give them your email. You still have time. But yeah, the Grounded Connection program is all about that. And the Walk in the Park, you mentioned Musicality of Being workshops in Washington, D.C., is doing this kind of thing in person in a beautiful park, which adds another nice layer. But yeah, we can meet on Zoom and do this kind of thing. And just because of timing, and there's sort of a segue here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Grounded Connection program. Okay. But this is what it's about, right? It's understanding that in any moment of our lives, whether we're alone or we're with another person, we have the opportunity to practice kindness, connection, curiosity, play, right? And we might move along that continuum. I've sort of presented them in that order. I made a really silly picture today. Maybe some of you saw it. Let's see if you can see this. Maybe I'll put it on the screen big. But the point is, like, before I connect with you, if I'm not kind to myself, then what you're going to experience in being with me is me mainly looking at myself, right? Because I'm like all flustered about what do you think of me, and I'm more in relation to myself than I am to you. So the first kindness is kind of to myself, and people, the inner voice is a big thing that we work with in Grounded Connection. And as we did it here today, when I say the inner voice, it might be that I tell myself I'm no good when I make a mistake, but it also might be that I move my body in such a way that I'm being unkind to my body. That's wordless, but it's the same. How am I relating to myself? Or if I feel angry because something happened that made me angry, but then I immediately tell myself, you're not supposed to be angry. You shouldn't be angry. Being angry is bad. I deny myself the fact that I even have a feeling, right? So once I can learn how to be kind to myself, then I can turn outwards. And so that's why I think a little bit of a progression. And then when I'm connected to the person, I can learn more about them. Or if I'm connected to, the state of my posture, I can actually notice some distinctions that might improve my posture. Then I can open myself to something new. I can get curious. And then potentially, if I really feel okay with everything, I'm not so worried about mistakes. I'm connected with something new. Like a couple of you noticed, I notice a habit, and then I can step outside of my habits and play. And I can do all of those things at any moment, because at a certain point I might be playing and suddenly something happens, and here comes the inner voice. Oh, time to remember kindness, right? So, but I use the phrase anytime, anywhere awareness because I also, in my experience practicing the Feldenkrais method, I've had a daily meditation practice for years, and I've also been trained in the art of circling, which is a relational practice, which is all about essentially being in conversation with another person. But what often happens with all of these practices is we do something like today, we go to a workshop and we feel great, and then we don't feel great the next afternoon, and we want to know why. And of course, when we do something like this, it's concentrated and we can get a burst of something. But really, if we never learn how to integrate it into daily life, if I never learn how to have a good day, even though I was late to work and my boss wasn't happy about it, even though, the the food you ordered took 2 hours to be delivered, like those things happen. And if I'm really connected to myself and the world in a particular way, I can shift with those currents. And the world is very uncertain right now, right? That's like a guaranteed thing. But something that we often do is we fight with reality. It rains and we say it shouldn't be raining. This is not helpful, right? But we do it all the time. You shouldn't talk to me that way. Well, maybe I don't like how someone's talking to me, but they are talking to me that way. That is the fact of the matter. So how do I respond, right? And so this is what the practice is about. And then on the live calls, what you did in the breakout rooms, that we do that on the live calls. We do somatic practice together and we interact with each other. And even when we're in the big room, we really notice not only what we're talking about, but how does it feel to be talking about it? How does it feel for me to speak? How does it feel for me to listen? Right? And we really notice that. And it's always about encouraging each other and then going out into daily life and trying to integrate it. I notice a few people from Grounded Connection who are here, if any of you want to say a few words, so it's not just my version. Any one of you want to do that? Karine.
Yeah, I'll do that. I've been doing the Grounded Connection program. It's been a practice that has changed my life. Right now, I don't know if you can tell, but I am really tired and I'm in a lot of pain, and yet there's a smile on my face, and that's something I never would have expected. I've learned how to slow down. That was a very important part. So, like Thomas had said earlier, and also being kind to myself was huge. That was probably one of the biggest things that I had to learn how to do, because my self-talk was very much negative in the, oh, I can't believe you just did that kind of a thing. And the program really, really has helped me with that, helped me with relationships with other people. And I've found it one of the most valuable things I've ever done.
Do you want to say a couple words about contact improv?
Sure. I fell in love with it. It just seemed like something so much fun. And so I looked for something around here and I started doing contact improv. And for those of you who don't know what it is, it's pretty much completely unstructured. You get together with people and you play with the contact. And it can be just something as simple as like your hands touching each other and just seeing where that goes. And that's something that also I don't know that I mentioned. I have a neuromuscular disorder, and up until recently, I have been unable to do much of anything. And so that was huge that I was able to do that. And it felt comfortable in part because there wasn't a structure, a super duper structure. I could back away if I got too exhausted or if it was too much for me. But I could also, I've found that I can handle a lot more than I used to be able to handle physically. So yeah, it's been really great in so many ways.
I just wanted Carrie to share that last piece because, you know, she had to think a new thought before she went out and dance contact improv, given, you know, that so that all these things are connected. And that was something that she did. That wasn't the program, but, you know, that's the kind of thing that can come out of it.
I think Sylvia had said it earlier, right? Like, oh my goodness, how in the world am I going to track all of this? It's a lot when I'm by myself. How could I possibly do it with other people? And I think that's exactly right. It's a practice, right? And it's something that takes time. And it really, I mean, the anywhere, anytime awareness is so beautiful. And Seth has just offered it here. You know, that is so, so rich. So diving into that deeper, and there's so many layers of each aspect of it. And then something that I love is the communal aspect of it and the relational, right? So Seth had talked about sometimes people are like, that's my favorite part is getting, and it is so rich to take the time to pause, to be tracking, you know, there's been mention of slowing down, to like really deepen. It's such a kindness to oneself to slow down and deepen into your own experience, and then getting to reinforce that with other people. It's just so rich. And really, there are so many layers to it. And Seth holds a beautiful container and facilitates it wonderfully. And there's, yeah, if you're considering it, if you're curious, I would definitely recommend the program. It was great.